You will address me by my new name. I once worked for the second most toxic man I have ever known. This was a small business of him, the owner, myself and my long-suffering colleague. So he was in complete control with no one to report to. My boss was an absolute manchild who would launch into hours-long absolute-esque fits of pants soiling fury over the smallest inconvenience. And then as soon as his problem was solved would act frustrated and sulky that we weren't all celebrating his victory. He would have these tantrums several times a week. Our shop was on a high street. I felt bad for our business neighbors having to put up with it. It's only now, years later, I remember we had student flats above us as well. When my boss wasn't risking detonating his own nads into a fine red mist of rage, he was otherwise insufferable. He would also frequently get hyper and giddy and make fun of us, lost in a fit of giggles while calling us nonsense. Or he would decide that some new form of honors should be bestowed on him, like we should be made to call him Sir, or Master, or Darth. Seriously. Imagine a man that has never in his life held a stick or pole without swinging it around making lightsaber noises. Once day he decides we are to call him Daddy Cool. We argue and resist and oh forth sake at him, but he is insistent that we are to all refer to him henceforth as Daddy Cool. I step away from the insanity to take my lunch in the basement. I chill a little and my own anger settles to weary resignation. Dangerous, perilous, weary resignation. I climb the steps from the basement. I burst through the door and bellow in my stage voice, Daddy Cool. Customers are in the shop being tended to by my boss. I ignore them. My colleague crumples into hysterics, gasping OMG between breaths. We have run out of XYZ. Daddy Cool. We should order some of UVW also. Daddy Cool. I address him as Daddy Cool for days until he's like, okay, alright, that's enough. Actually no. I continue to refer to him as Daddy Cool well beyond him begging me to stop. And several more times as necessary over the years when a reminder is necessary. Asking the question that will be on everyone's mind, why did you stay in this job? I would have made sure this masterpiece was playing somewhere constantly. I imagine that you delivered that big, Daddy Cool, exactly like The Rock did. Hilarious. Perfect compliance to a man-baby's wishes. Nice writing style too. I'd a similar situation, working in hospitality, under a manager who insisted on being addressed as Your Greatness, and any reference to him should be of the Great One. It finally got knocked on the head when a speaker at a conference, with a similar sense of humor to my own, would abruptly pause when said manager entered the back of the room, e.g. to check coffee stations had been arranged properly ahead of a break, and make the entire audience, 200 plus people, and chant in a religious tone, All hail to the Great One for he is so wise, and invite him to the podium to impart his wisdom. Seriously. Imagine a man that has never in his life held a stick or pole without swinging it around making lightsaber noises. I feel personally attacked. My mom had a boss like that in an office. No one to report him to because there was no corporate to go to. He did realize he couldn't run the office without her, so his tirades were minimized most of the time. Until one day she started to plan a move to less than resort town. She had always wanted to live near the ocean and she finally in a position to think about it. She hadn't fully committed yet, but she had started the process of figuring out the money. She hadn't told anyone yet. A few days later, the boss started one of his whopper tirades, blaming her for something he did, just yelling at her for no reason. She said she stood there during the yelling and instead of reacting like she usually does, she just told him, "Thank you for making up my mind." The next day she submitted her formal 60 days notice. They needed that long to find and train her replacement. It worked out great for her. She had a new job within days of arrival. And she realized her worth because that small town actually fought over who she was going to work for. She had at least 6 offers in a week, all at or more than what she was asking for compensation. My boss wasn't risking detonating his own nads into a fine red mist of rage. He was otherwise insufferable. He would also frequently get hyper and giddy and make fun of us, lost in a fit of giggles while calling us nonces. Do you think it was regular drug use? Did everyone ever tell him how you're all crazy like a fool for his new name? Is your ex-boss Michael Scott's cousin or something? It's fascinating that a few commenters seem to think this story is made up. Once you've worked for small businesses, you realize that this personality type is more common than not. And it's a confusing thing. The community tends to think of the boss, owner as a local hero. But the casual employee abuse from a person like this is constant. And often pretty frightening. Plus, they always think they're the funniest person in any room. Exhausting. I think it has something to do with starting a business from nothing. Laudable. Yes. And then slowly starting to think of oneself as an emperor, empress. I have no problem at all believing this story is true. Detonating his own nads into a fine red mist of rage. I love it! Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. I hear this story to the tune of the Boney M song and I almost fell off a chair laughing. Detonating his own nads into a fine red mist of rage. That is beautiful. Seriously. Imagine a man that has never in his life held a stick or pole without swinging it around making lightsaber noises. Sue. All men? We should be made to call him Sir. Or Master. Or Darth. This is hilarious. BC. My fiance's gamer tag is Darth rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing. I once worked for the second most toxic man I have ever known. I'm amazed no one else has asked yet. He was only second place. Who the hell came in first? A man that has never in his life held a stick or pole without swinging it around making lightsaber noises. Of course I know him. He's me. Half of Reddit. Daddy who? Funny that he chose the name Daddy Cool but called you guys the nonces. Especially seeing as there is a song by Kid Rock in the movie Osmosis Jones where a character named Daddy Cool literally sings the words. Some say that it's statutory. But I say that it's mandatory.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.